Hello everyone and welcome to this video. If you are following my creations, you may have noticed that the rat haul truck is officially out. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments what you think, how it handles, if it's useful to you, and all that good stuff. Now, one thing that I want to note right off the bat is it actually useful in its current format and configuration? Of course, I'm talking about the massive hoppers in this extremely lifted area in the truck bed and how you can possibly use them. Well, for that, I am developing this stacker. So in this video, we're going to develop the stacker, we're going to work on it. I'll tell you some of the requirements, the sort of design process that I'm going through in making it work with the haul truck and all that good stuff. So as I said, the truck is very tall, big, and right now there's nothing for you to do. You can't load it, you can't do anything other than drive it. Well, I don't like that. I want my creations to be useful to you, so I'm developing this. Now this is what I'm going to call the smallest of my stackers, and I'll explain that later. But pretty much what you do is you come with your dump truck, you back it up, you lift the hoppers and unload them into these, whereby it will start to deposit via that chute into the truck. And then you could take the truck, drive it, whatever. So the idea behind this is to be a mobile stacker. Now, I do work on these types of equipment in real life, and they can be absolutely massive. This is about as small as they come, but what's nice about this is it is a mobile unit, meaning you attach it to a vehicle and you could actually drive it around. Now this will require some reconfiguration. You can see it's quite top heavy, it wants to tip over, but you can pretty much take it from place to place. Now the idea behind it is that you can tow it, it's mobile. What I was saying is it is the smallest unit, meaning that there's no extension. This is just pretty much what you get. Now I do want to make eventually a system and a method that are much larger on crawlers and all that stuff, but like I said, let's start somewhere. This is what I'm kind of going and making, but it started off just like this, pretty much a truss section with a bunch of various ducts inside it, so they serve to transport the minerals. Now if you're familiar with how the game works, if you have minerals in this one, you also have minerals in that one. They just act as one single unit. Then I went ahead and extended it a little bit, added the duct here, and we'll make it controllable such that it's not always depositing material. That's why it's going to be, in essence, in real life, it's a conveyor, right? You deposit minerals there, you turn on your conveyor, and they pretty much fall out of this end. Now this is where it gets tricky. I really do want to make it spawnable in a train station. Now it may hit the roof of the train station or train spawning area, but I don't want to make it only spawnable in large hangars. So that is kind of one of my requirements for this. And I started playing around with designs like this, but you see in this first instance, it's actually heavy on the wrong side. Of course, adding the hoppers on this end where you can pretty much deposit minerals made it, oh no, a little better, barely. And finally, that leads me to the variant I have now. So I did go ahead and add a trailer hitch here. Now the point of that is so you can tow it with regular vehicles. Then I also put a wheel here on this side because when it spawns, it drops down and I don't want that side to be dragging on the ground. Now, what would be nicer is if I had two wheels here and here, so then I could actually turn it properly, but you'll see that that presents a bit of a problem. And that problem is in terms of balancing, because it does take a bit of patience to try to get this thing working. You'll see, first of all, I have to get these things in, but even something like this if I spawn that in, that's a bit better. It seems that that wheel is only there to kind of provide guidance, whereas these two would be the ones actually touching the ground. So that may be the most ideal system. Now, I am limited by the pieces, and I'm trying not to make a bunch of different bodies that rotate and pivot. Rather, I just want it to kind of be one section, if you will, and that section will operate and would perform pretty much as one, rather than having, like I said, a pivot and a piston and stuff that moves it up and down. Again, the smallest, the most simplest variant here. Now, the one other requirement is that the bigger this hopper side is, the easier we'll dump things from our trucks. But a problem to that is the bigger it is, also the higher it is, right? So if I were to make it like only one row of hoppers, it would be a little lower, but I think this is a good size. Now, there was an interesting piece of information that one of my Discord server members said, and he said, why don't I make this actually controllable, steerable, just so people can reposition it rather than have to use a vehicle. And I actually think that's a fantastic idea. Now, again, one of the limitations being the physical angle, and for that I may have to use one of the pistons or otherwise pivots, but I think that that's a decent idea, actually, a very good idea. Now, one thing in addition to these is how will it be operated, and not just that, I have to add the HGS system that I use for my vehicles so it actually can, brake and use these wheels. And then on top of that, there will be a system to actually deploy and enable this to go through that funnel. Right now it's just using a constant on, but I don't want that. Like I said, I want it to be a makeshift conveyor. I beefed it up a little bit with more supports. It makes it look a little more structurally sound and gives it a bit more detail. Of course, I will add rat decals and all that good stuff, but for now, this is sort of where I'm heading at. I'm going to add the HGS system, and that's going to actually make it much easier to control with vehicles. It's going to have a handbrake and all that stuff, and then we'll also, not only that, put power to the wheels. And I want to see how that can be, because I don't want it moving very fast, but I do want it to have some movement and ability to reposition by itself. I added some decals, I added some lights, and now what we'll have to do finally is put that little control center, as well as, first of all, a breaker. The breaker will serve as the main sort of junction for the power to this trailer. And of course, live is what I make is always electric A, and then B is everything else. So that way you have power to certain things, but not everything right off the bat. And that just allows you to kind of have a little more control over what it is you're trying to do. Then I did also put some taillights here. They look kind of cool, like almost like Cadillac taillights, but there they are. And there you have it. So it's connected to HGS, it's connected to this power, and lastly, now we just have to try to tie in the controls and see how all that works. I put batteries, and in addition to the batteries, I've put these control handles. So what you can do is you can get into the control handle and reposition the thing. Now I've actually put control handles on both sides of this, and I did put a pivot, but the idea is that no matter which side you hop into, you could reposition this thing and make it aligned to where you need it to be. Now, let's go back to the workbench. I also, in addition to these control handles, I want to add in here an instrument panel. And that instrument panel will give us pretty much the handbrakes. It'll give us certain things on this device that can be useful for opening up the duct and other control features. So I did some detailing, added some lights, added some features, And ultimately now what I have to do is make this control panel work. I did put a plug-in on both sides so you could charge the batteries up if need be. Overall, the shape is looking much better, and now it'll come down to the functionality. I did add a couple things here, so the handbrake, the lights, opening the duct, and material in the stacker. So you'll be able to know if there is material or not just off looking at that little control panel. Now, it's not intended for you to operate and look at this number. It's just the handle's there for operation, and then you hop on to the side and press the buttons to make it work or not. So I've added some of the features. Now let's see if we disconnect it. So first of all, looking at this, the brake is true because it's connected. If we disconnected, the brake is false. Okay, that's the first step, meaning now I could push it around. But if I press that, it should be true again. So that's working. Lights. Okay, I've added the lights on the underside, and I've added the lights there and on top, kind of shining down on the truck. And open funnel, and material will fall out. As here you could see also there is material in the stacker itself. Now, because the control handles are facing in opposite directions, I don't want to have them both be identical. I want, if you're facing this way, forward will move you that way. If you're facing this way, forward will move you that way. So I have to have that kind of logic. So it will come down to being a microcontroller with two inputs, and then having these motors with the wheel steering. Now, I did have to modify the HGS standard to allow for a handbrake and a brake input, but pretty much what we're going to have now is the brake goes to there, the throttle will go to my wheels, and the steering left and steering right. So we're just going to have to put these and these, and of course plugging in seat 1 and plugging in seat 2. So with that, we hop into the microcontroller, but first have to pay attention to this where it says value 1 is AD, value 2 is WS. So in here, that means value 1 is the steering. So if I set this to channel 1, that should be going to my steering, whereas value 2 should go to my throttle. Now, how I'm going to make this operate is if we're not pressing a throttle, it's going to be applying the brakes. So it's not going to have a way to brake from the control. It's just going to be if there's not throttle, it'll be braking. Quite simple. It's intended to serve as kind of a safety and a fallback. Now, I just have to make sure that the thing can only brake if we are using it, rather than if it's being towed, for example. You're going to put your handbrakes on, but if you're towing it, you don't want it to be braking all the time. So that comes down to another one of these seat things, which is if you are sitting on it. So occupied is 32. So in here, if we select 32 from the composite, we can actually make it such that it will then be occupied and not adding throttle, then you'll be braking. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to put these. Now for now, we're just going to worry about one side, not the other. So in this case, right, if this is reading true and not throttle, then brake. I did a little bit of reconfiguration here, and as you could see, if I'm sitting on the seat and I'm not pressing the forward or reverse buttons, then it'll be braking. So that's kind of what I added here. And I added a function to divide both the throttle by 4 and divide the steering by 3. So just so it doesn't go to the end extents. And the nice thing about this is it also limits the acceleration of the thing. I want it to go really slow. And lastly, I added a steering left and a steering right. So that we plugged into the brake in the brake input here, and the brakes are of course going to the wheels. And I also staggered the steering. So you'll see here the steering is staggered such that the left is controlling the left there and these two here, and the right does the opposite. Now, one thing to keep in mind is because this stacker spawns in a horizontal position and bends upwards like this, these wheels are actually positioned at a bit of an angle. So when I jump on this and turn the wheel, they do kind of bend. You see that they kind of bend down. So I can't really give it too much of a spin, but you can see I'm still able to control it, which is nice, and able to kind of operate the thing. Now, I do want to actually change the control handle, the WS and this stuff. The W and S, I want it to be fairly, like, I want it to be 100% sensitivity, so I want it to immediately brake or give it throttle. I don't want to kind of have a slow build-up, so if I hold this now and let go, it pretty much brakes right away. So that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted it to look like this, and let go, and it brakes. Now, yes, it can tip over, so I may have to reduce the throttle. I feel like this is probably too fast for this type of thing. But otherwise, that does get kind of the point across of what I'm trying to do for the control. So I hid the microcontrollers up here. You can see them. Now, with this hopper, material hopper, the last thing I need to do is actually change the microcontroller here to add the extra seat. Now I need to be very careful in here because there are a couple of things at play. So first of all, we got to keep in mind that when it's braking, it's also because we're not sitting on that one seat, but when we have two seats, we're always not going to be sitting on one of them. So how does that work, right? Well, this function has to be duplicated for both of them. Well, first of all, we have to put our composite reads here because, of course, there's no composite or and, so we'll need these exact ones mirrored. But we'll also need this expression here, which means if we're sitting on this seat and if we're not pressing the button, then we want it to brake. So then is when this actually gets triggered. So we'll put the OR function here, attach this and this, and attach it to this. So that completes our braking cycle, but it doesn't complete our throttle. It also doesn't complete our steering. So for those ones, we're just going to put a simple plus or add. Now keep in mind that if you have two people on two of the different seats at the same time, it won't really function properly. It's not intended to, right? So you'll end up in a situation where it doesn't really work. But we're going to take this one here from the first composite, we'll put it there and there. Then from the second one, we're going to link it there, and we're going to link it there, and these we put there. So now the two seats should function at the same time as long as we're not, well, you shouldn't be sitting on them in two people. So if we hop on here, if we press back, it should go backward. If we steer, it should steer. So that's good. Now, the one drawback to this system actually is right now they both, well, if I go on this one here, and if I press W, meaning forward, it actually goes backward for this handle. So I may want to switch that around. Whereas when I steer, it also goes opposite. So this one handle, I'll probably need to revise. Now I just need to see which ones I plug that into. So this handle here is the correct one, and that is handle 1 or seat 1. So seat 2, I need to flip everything. So I just took a simple negative expression, and with that done, I'm thinking that if we hop onto this handle over here, and if we press W, it's going to move W. If we hold D, it's going to turn to the right. So that actually seems to be working properly now. The only drawback now is this braking system, but unfortunately, like what I have now is this handbrake button that stops it. I don't really want to get too complex with making these fine adjustments. This is supposed to be a very rough style rig where if you don't know how to use it, then that's not the fault of anyone but yourself. So I'm not making these to be designed for every type of user. It's a rat equipment. It's intended for professionals. But I do suppose for safety reasons, it's probably a good idea to have a key. So when you turn the key, then the system is, going to be responding to movement. So this is more like a enable movement. Called it repositioning control. So when that is on, then the system is active. And if that is on and it's moving, I do want it to be braking unless we're pushing it. So this repositioning control must be off if you're towing it. I've added this enable function, which now uses these composite switch boxes to talk to the seats. So if it's not enabled, pretty much we're getting 0 going to all this, which is very easy. And now what I want to do here is have something where if I'm not sitting on either of these seats, then I want the thing to be, and it's on, I want it to be braking. So for that, we're going to take the not expression, which is right here. So if we are not sitting at this seat, and if we're not sitting at this seat, so if we're not sitting at either seat, right? Not and not. And if the thing is on, like that. So if we're not sitting at any of the seats and the thing is on, then I want the brake to be enabled. So that would pretty much result in this thing being switched to the off or on position where the brakes are enabled and they're pressing. So we see here we have the or and or, and I'm just going to add another or here with this one. So that's the third instance. So either one of these cases, or if we're not sitting on it, then I want the brakes enabled. So if I jump on, try to operate it, it doesn't work. If I jump on this side, try to operate it, doesn't work. If I turn the key and try to operate it, it does work. So we're getting this, and if I let go, it should start to brake soon. Not very fast, but okay. And then likewise on this side, now if I'm holding backwards, it's going to move and I could steer it. But if I jump off, it should instantaneously cause the wheels to be on. Now you could see that the variable brake is 0.1. So currently they're actually on. Whereas if I'm on it, obviously they're not on because I'm able to control it. Now, one of the drawbacks I could see is actually if the sides lift up, I don't get a good angle to steer this thing. Like, see, that is unfortunate. Once they touch the ground, then I'm able to steer it. But that may just be one of the downsides of this whole contraption being so heavy on this side. And I guess what I should and can do is try to really beef up the amount of weight I have in this area, and that would help it to fall back on itself more times than not. So that is, I guess, what I could and should do up on this end. In addition to that, I've added weights here to sort of force this side to be as heavy as possible. For additional weight on the actual bottom, I could add some of these barrels, and they'll look kind of like support members or bracing, but really they'll be acting like weight on the bottom. So I think that may be a decent place for that. A nice little detail, actually. All the extra weights seem to work. So right now, it doesn't really lift off. Even when I'm braking, it doesn't really lift off. So that is a good sign. I went and added a lot of weight here, including battle cannon extensions. But what I think this actually looks like, and very realistic in real life, is they look like liners. You'll tend to have stuff like this in very heavy mechanical sort of applications because they're wear liners, and as they get hit, they wear down, and then you replace them. So that's kind of what this could almost be described as. The one thing I would like to do is get the color to be kind of matching and really dark, because end of the day, imagine you pounding on this thing and hitting it with materials and stuff. You will wear it down, so you'd like to be able to replace it pretty easily. One final change on this unit, actually, what I want to do is bring this there, bring the key to operate it to the upright position so we could easily access it from even the control panel, and then that's down there where we turn on the handbrake and whatnot. And you'll notice now I put the camera screen, so when you are sitting in this seat here, so it's occupied, this automatically turns on that display there. And I did put a camera and added aim to it as well, so it should be aiming downward at a proper angle. So if we hop into this seat, we'll drive it right over top of that red line, so the red line can kind of serve as where we're trying to dump, and I'll see if the display shows what we're trying to show. So if I jump in here, I'd say it's pretty accurate. Now in the case of a train, you'll see that this system is still working, but it's way too high. There's not really much need to have such a large stacker if we're just trying to simply use and load up a train. So this can actually be drastically reduced for that instance. So I just reduced it to here. Now we do have to fix up some of these glitches that came with the movement, but otherwise on the top our path is continuous, so that's important. Actually, probably the most important thing is that our path's continuous, and everything else is purely visual. Even this reduction is way too much, still way too big, so I have to get it even smaller, and that's actually going to help so much for transporting this unit around. It'll be just a small train loading unit rather than the massive haul truck unit. So visually this is the proper height. I will move this stuff there, but that is probably all we need to satisfactorily load trains. For the case of this one, it'll be much smaller, so I'm even going to remove this whole axle and put the towing hitch in this area here. Already looking much better, so I do have all this area to fix, but now you could put the train beneath it pretty easily, and the nice thing is you still get the ability to move it around, albeit with a single axle, much smaller unit, lower to the ground, easier to transport, easier to spawn. So this is probably perfect for any type of train-based or even large dump truck application that's not a haul truck. One thing I actually want to do is have it such that if you are pressing the spacebar, only then do you go reverse. So I don't want the reverse to be the holding S down or whatever. It causes too many issues, especially when it comes to trying to stop the thing. So I'm not a fan of that. I actually prefer the brakes instead of this whole thing. I did a little test, a little trial run, and I did not like the current setup. It's very hard to get it into the exact position where something like this is critical for getting it into that right position. So I've added this switch box where if we are holding space, then it goes to negative values of the intended number. So it goes into that, and meaning it now is giving us the reverse option, but that doesn't necessarily satisfy everything, because what we also need to do is actually limit or clamp the thing to prevent it in the first place from going past 0 in essence. So that is actually going to be the first thing we do, is we're going to have to clamp the thing, and here under read value coming from the throttle, we're going to have it first go to that clamp, which is going to be between 0 and 1, and then enter both this and this. And likewise for this part here as well. So rather than doing this, it goes into here we have a negative function because we wanted it to go to work in that opposite direction actually. So the clamp has to go before that. So it goes here and then into these ones. So it's starting to look like a really big mess here, but hopefully this now lets us work the thing properly. Now, also another thing we'd want to do is have the threshold option. If we are pressing S on the control keyboard, then you'll want the brake to be applied. But actually, that's easy to do because we already have the brakes being applied if we're in the area of -1 and 1. So all we have to do, and 0.1. So all we have to do now is make this -1 and make this 0, or even we could leave it at 0.1. And then likewise for this one here, if it's reading values coming out of this negative, well, first of all, we don't want that. We want it to be coming straight out of this guy here, like that. And then it's going to be the exact same. It'll be -1 and 0.1. And I have to double check to make sure this one here is also coming out of that same one. See, it has to come directly out of this, not after the clamp. Let's see how that works. So if we hop in, turn on the repositioning control, and if we press W, we should be able to get the thing to move forward. Okay, if I press S, I should get the thing to stop and not move backwards. Perfect. Now if I hold space and press W, it should start to work backwards. So that actually works. Now currently the space is toggle, but I don't want to toggle it. I want it to permanently be in a state of wanting to go forward, and if we press space, it's the reverse. So I'm just going to put push. So you have to hold it to do that, and likewise on this side we'll want it to be reversed with push. And for that reason, WS is actually now throttle and brake. Okay, WS, meaning forward and backward, is now throttle and brake, whereas up here we have steering. For the final test, here we are at the mine site, and you could see I've actually placed the rat haul trucks, and they're the larger wheel versions, so the ones that I XML modded the wheels. You could see how much better this looks, and even with the upgraded ride height, the stacker still reaches over top, so that's a great sign. Now over here, we will be able to reposition this thing. So first things first, let's try to see if this works. So right now there's nothing in the stacker, it's on. We could even turn the lights on. And let's get into this control handle and we could position it. Now maybe a display would be smart, because what do I know right now if I'm over top or not? Like, So I have to go a little, well, that'd probably be okay. Do you want to monitor? I don't know. I mean, having one here would be useful, but then you'd have to have one on each side. I guess if you're using it on this side, you don't really care what the monitor shows. You're just moving it. But on this side, a monitor would help probably, especially if it was right here. Anyway, that's fine. Now well, actually, we don't even need the handbrake. Technically, the variable brake is on, but we could put the handbrake on. Not a big deal. And let's open the funnel up, because as soon as I get this truck in position, I'm going to want the material to start dropping into the haul truck. So, if I back up this, first let's do a nice straight back up so we can get the, so I can get the actual load falling into the hopper properly. So just like this. Now, hopefully this hopper that I've placed is far enough or tall enough that this can actually operate properly, but I think it will. So let's tilt this up. Alright, and now we can release it. There we have it. Look at that. So we're able to deposit the minerals into the haul truck pretty easily like this. I don't see that we're losing any minerals on this end, and I don't think we're losing any minerals on this end either. So I'll see if I add the camera. I mean, I think it's not a bad idea to be able to see what we're doing, but overall, take a look at that. So with this fairly simple creation, I would say, we're able to now use our haul truck for actually hauling the material. Now, in what case would you actually go from this small one to the big one? Well, let me tell you. If you use one of these. So this is my miner truck that actually has the drills on the back, and then you could use this chute to deposit into that chute and likewise drop it into your haul truck directly from the mine, and then have your haul truck deliver this to the surface or whatever the case may be. But regardless, this actually now would give the haul truck a purpose that was previously not possible. Of course, the haul truck is great if you could load it, but if you can't load it, it doesn't really work. So anyway, thank you for watching. I will be making another stacker that is expandable, but I think this is more or less fine for what we have in mind here. Anyway, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more videos. Stay tuned for the release of this creation as well as other creations. And as always, happy Stormworksing, everyone. See you next time. On a similar note, just a little for fun information, I did add this display here so you could actually see how many minerals you have. And one thing that always kind of bothered me with this creation was if you're trying to offload from this, you have a tough time because you have to turn this on, and by the time you press the dump button, it switches over to this camera and you could miss the shoot entirely. So what I did now is, rather than the default being the mineral button or the mineral screen like this, which just shows kind of under the truck, the default now is the actual dumper. So you could then position this as you need and then press dump and it will dump. And of course, if you do want to drill, you press drill and it will change to the drill camera, which just ends up being a little easier because most likely you'll be able to drive with the drill on like this, and then you come across a part and then lower your drill down and start to mine.